Probably got busy days today, so thank you for joining our Lunch and Learn webinar today. We are talking about some of the newest Mentor Collective feature releases around identifying sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy throughout the year. I am extremely excited about these powerful new features, which give us real-time access to very important non-cognitive insights from students and about students. So let's just get started. My name is Annemieke Rice. I am a member of the Mentor Collective team. I'm the Vice President of Partner Success. I am partially leading today's webinar because I'm a huge data geek and a huge fan of formative assessment and the opportunity as data drive student success outcomes. I am very excited that I am joined by my colleague, Kelley Johnson. She has led the team here who has designed and created and finessed and launched the features that we are going to share with you all today. And Kelley and I are really excited to show some of these things off and talk about the conversations we've been having with you as some of you get started with these tools. Our agenda today is we are going to talk first about the concept of assessments and the source of these data, and then Kelley is going to jump into the live site and show everyone exactly what we're talking about in these tools. We will have time for questions. We have a few FAQs prepared based on the things that our partner success team has already been hearing from partners. So thank you for those, but I do encourage you to chat in your questions as we go, and we'll take a peek at the chat at the end and make sure we can answer those. And we'll wrap up with some suggestions for next steps for those of you to take advantage of some of the things we're talking about today. A few suggestions before we get started. Everyone's audio is on mute. But we do suggest that you update your video layout to speaker view if that's of interest to you. And then please, our colleague Alex just asked you to introduce yourself in chat. We know from chatting with all of our partners that one of the most valuable things about the events that we host is the opportunity for you to engage with each other. So please do take advantage of the opportunity to see and learn from the other folks in the Mentor Collective who are here today. Again, you are welcome to submit your questions in chat right within the chat feature throughout the time that we have here today. So let's jump right in. As I mentioned, I'm really excited to talk about these features. We are now providing you all these features are live with the ability to have full visibility into data about sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy. With the new features that we're sharing today, you'll be able to actively monitor how students are feeling on campus at specific points in their journey through the source of data of this being our assessment surveys. You do have access to download all of those data at any time and have a great time understanding, analyzing, and using those data to amplify your student success strategy. And we hope to add more of these types of features in the future. So we're really excited also for your feedback and your response to how you might use these data and what other types of questions that you have. So let's get started. I'm going to start a little bit with a primer. Some of the folks on the line here today might be in their first year with Mentor Collective and are still learning the ropes and how things work. Others might be new to their institution, even if your institution is a long-standing partner of ours. So the source of the data that we're talking about today are research-backed surveys. We call these the assessments. These are assessments that are sent to the participants in the mentorship, the mentee and the mentor, at up to 3 points in their journey in that mentorship, usually the start, middle, and end. We'll talk a little bit more about the sequencing. And these are research-backed survey instruments, meaning that the Mentor Collective team focused on some of the academic literature that looks at what are the factors that drive student success and retention, what are the factors that we know mentorship specifically addresses in terms of maximizing the impact to students and their effectiveness. And so we're really focused on the types of questions that will give you insights into those arenas. These particular assessments are launched at a timeline that you choose. Your program success manager is guiding you through those choices, but I just want to give a few examples of the ways that we see that play out based on your program design and your particular sequencing. You might be on a semester calendar, you might be on a quarter calendar, you might be engaging with first-year students, you might be engaging with continuing students. So typically, if we take an example of a first-year student success program, maybe your first time in college, your transfer students who are joining your institution for the first time, maybe your first-time graduate students. Typically, what we see is that the start of school can cue off the start of the program, and that usually we see something like the start of program survey launching shortly after mentee recruitment begins. And then maybe your mid-program survey might happen at an important catch point in the middle of that mentorship experience, such as a return to school in January if you're a semester program. And then your end of program survey, we encourage you to send that no later than 2 weeks before you wrap up your program. Many of you are wrapping up programs right now, so you're collecting survey data right now. These are programs that generally are focused on retention as an outcome, sense of belonging as an outcome. But there are other types of programs that Mentor Collective partners run. Strategic enrollment programs often are focused not just on retaining students from the first to the second year, but also keeping students from deposit to matriculation. And those programs often start before students actually set foot at the institution or have their first day of classes. So your startup program survey might already be going out. Maybe your mid-program survey is a little bit into the first term of the semester. And then finally, if you are working potentially with upper class students in a program designed to help with their career, some of our programs will actually launch these a little bit into the start of the school year. So maybe your startup program survey happens in September or October, and that crunches up your mid-program and end of program survey. All of this is to say, there are some basic defaults that we can advise you on, but it's really about when collecting data will be meaningful to you based on what you're trying to address with your students and how they're interacting with the academic experience at your institution. There are a number of different assessment survey types. Again, these are very connected to your program outcomes and the way that you are designing your mentorship experience for students. Almost all of them assess sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy. The student success assessments measure those two concepts. Our strategic enrollment assessments measure sense of belonging, academic self-efficacy, as well as influential factors to their decision to enroll. The adult online assessments measure sense of belonging, academic self-efficacy, and career self-efficacy. But our career assessments measure career-specific domains. Career self-efficacy, help seeking intention, use of career services. These assessments do not include sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy factors because they're not based in relevant literature or research in these particular domains. So the features that we're reviewing today, some of them are specific to sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy. So it's something to keep in mind. You'll only see those data if you collect those data. I want to share an example survey. As I mentioned, they are distinct based on program outcomes, but just to give you a sense of the types of questions that are being asked of your mentors or mentees. Registered participants at the start of program survey will see questions like, I feel comfortable, I feel supported, I'm confident, I feel like I'm an important member of my community. And then as the mentorship progresses and they're asked questions in their mid and end of surveys, you'll see that we ask some questions about the mentorship experience in addition to repeating the questions about sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy. Something else to note here is that there are open-ended questions asked of your students that could be very helpful for you in program design or student success strategy. So something to be aware of when Kelley shares the export is, what data do you have right now that could help you with summer programming, welcome back interventions, and some of the ways that you approach effectiveness in this next coming school year. I want to share before we jump into the live demo here that sense of belonging has a long-standing core concept of a number of functions and disciplines within higher education. It's got 50, 40, 60 years of research behind it, but it is also extremely relevant right now. Many brand new, refreshed academic literatures, books of research, media features on sense of belonging as we reflect on what the student experience is like returning to campus post-pandemic in our current modern society. And so this is particularly relevant for many of you right now. It's a main reason why we're surfacing up a lot of these data as well. So quick definitions on what sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy means. Sense of belonging, feelings of being valued, included, and accepted in the community being at your institutions, or potentially even in a subgroup, like the first generation students at your institution, the transfer students at your institution. And academic self-efficacy is one's beliefs or attitudes about their own capabilities to have academic success. Do they feel confident, comfortable that they'll be able to complete the materials and do the learning that they're expected of them in the classroom? And both of these are tied over and over and over again, lots of research, to academic outcomes like GPA, credit progression, as well as to term, year-to-year retention. Both of these factors are tied to those. So now we're going to jump into some of these tools. So Kelley, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about why we developed these functionality and how we're hoping that institutions will leverage them.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for handing it off. So hello, everyone. Like Annemieke mentioned before, I'm Kelley, and I am a senior product manager here at Mentor Collective, and I had the pleasure of getting to work on some of these new features. So I'm excited to talk to you all about them today. And if you have questions, I'm a good person to ask, so don't be shy. But some of the use cases, some of the reasons why we actually built these features out are to make sure that you guys can have a much more holistic way to support your individual students. So for example, many of you right now might be utilizing our flags that come in. So you see a mentor says that a student is struggling with X specific thing, and you go address that flag. But now with this additional information around that student's sense of belonging or academic self-efficacy, you can have a more holistic picture of who the student is and how they're feeling when you want to make sure that you're providing them with some support. Also, this can more holistically inform your overall student support strategy or policies. So you can see things like sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy information on a high level overall for your entire program, which could be really, really useful as you're thinking about how to make some more holistic changes to your support strategies. And then also, this helps you identify some students that you may or may not be hearing from. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well when we jump into the demo.
So why don't we jump into it? Kelley's going to take over and jump into our demo site, and we're actually going to walk through some of these features and how you might actually use them to do your work.
Perfect. All
right. So first example, Kelley, that we hear a lot about is, if I'm in a student services function, let's say in my College of Technology, and I'm responsible for academic support of students, how can I actually see which students have a lower rating on academic self-efficacy? Thinking, how can I encourage help seeking? How can I intervene or support these students? How do I know who they are?
It's a perfect question, because that is a use case we did want to specifically build for. We know that the partner dashboard has a lot of information in it, and sometimes you need to be able to narrow it down to just the specific students that might need some extra help. So one of the things I want to direct your attention to is this new assessments tab here that you should all be able to see in your dashboard as long as you've sent some assessments in your program. If you look into this tab, you can now go into this chart here, which gives you some really high level information about all of the mentees or mentors in your program and what sense of belonging or academic self-efficacy score they've most recently provided. So for example, Annemieke, you said you wanted to look into academic self-efficacy for students who might perhaps be letting us know that they need a little bit of extra support. So we'll look at these students here who have let us know that they have an average academic self-efficacy score of below 3. If you click into that slice right there, you now have this list of exactly who those students are. But to your point, Annemieke, you had said that in this scenario, you are specifically responsible for students who are in one specific college. I think you mentioned the College of Technology. So this is actually an additional data point that we've pulled in for this specific institution through our new institution provided data feature. We know which college all of the students belong to. So we can now filter down to just the students in the College of Technology. And now you see that your list has gone down from 70 something to 45 students that you specifically could reach out to. Perhaps check to see if they're matched. Maybe you reach out to their mentors to see if there's anything specific that they've been struggling with, or you could reach out to them directly to provide some extra support.
And this is exportable. So if those of you who are thinking about taking this information and bringing it elsewhere, these are all available to you in-app and on the go. The next example is, you mentioned flags. So I know many of our institutions love the flags, love the intelligence from the flag. So if I'm looking at a flag that has already been submitted for a student, how can I see how they might have responded in terms of sense of belonging or academic self-efficacy to help me have a more holistic view of what's going on with that student?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly what we want to do there. So good job thinking about that. This is always true, right? This has been true for flags historically as well. It's a very good idea to make sure you're looking at more than just the flag specifically, but learning a little bit more about who the student is that needs support. But let's imagine this scenario where we've seen this actionable flag come in from this student right here. It looks like they've been tagged as struggling academically. We can open this flag up, learn a little bit more about this person, just as we normally would. Looks like they're having some challenges in chemistry. We can also see that they've had three flags in general reported. So you can always click into that to see exactly what flags have been coming up. And it looks like this mentor has been flagging that this person is struggling academically since about November. Now that we have this new data around sense of belonging and academic self-efficacy, we can click into this mentee's profile to understand where they are in these areas, right? So we saw that they were struggling academically. Now we can see that they also have provided us with information around their academic self-efficacy. It looks like the last time they responded to the surveys, their average score was about 3.67 out of 5, a little bit lower than the average for your program here. You can also see that it looks like they have a fairly low sense of belonging score that they've been reporting as well. If you wanted to, you could specifically look at their most recent assessment to see exactly what they were saying. So for example, this person is indicating that they are talking with their mentor as much as they like, they're having a really positive experience, but they're still feeling some of these things where they're not supported by their school. So this is a really great chance to reach out to the student, and it looks like they have a great relationship with their mentor. So maybe reach out to their mentor as well to see if there's anything we can do to support the student.
I think what's also really relevant here is that the data we're seeing is the most recent data collected from the students. Remember, they are asked these questions multiple times. So when you're serving a student in the moment, you're always doing that based on the most recent feedback or point of view that they have about their time at your school.
Exactly, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about students in aggregate. So if I want to understand just sense of belonging as a whole for my student population, what part of the site would I go to understand that?
Yeah. So I'd go back to this assessment tab we were talking about earlier. So you just go to your homepage, you click on assessments. And again, this is where you see a lot of that high level information, which might inform your overall strategy for supporting your students. So here you can see how many students and mentees and mentors are actually completing your survey. So that's great information to have. You can also see, like we saw on that person's profile page earlier, we could see that average sense of belonging or average self-efficacy score. This is where you're going to see that stuff presented a little bit more holistically. But we also now have this graph or chart that shows you average assessment area score over time. So you can see that for mentees, their sense of belonging in this program has been fairly consistent over time, but sometimes we do see programs where during the academic year, academic self-efficacy or sense of belonging might ebb or flow. You might see some peaks and some valleys. Especially if you're working with us year over year, you might start to notice some trends. For example, perhaps, let's say in October or something, you see every year sense of belonging seems to dip a little bit. If you start noticing trends like that, that is a really good indication that you could perhaps start offering some kind of additional support to students in the area of fostering sense of belonging around that time. Do that in your 4th year, right? And see if you release that information or if you release some of that support to students before that October slump normally happens, can you see that slump go away? So that would be something that I would try.
Great. And then how about analyzing the data, perhaps with some other tools that I have? I want to analyze the data as a whole, the open-ended questions, the thing I mentioned about there are some open-ended questions we've asked students and what can we learn from them in aggregate? How would I access and use that data?
Yeah, so this exports tab right here should not ever be underutilized. This export tab is very, very important. I highly encourage everyone to use it. And if you do, you'll notice that there are now some new exports available in here. So Annemieke mentioned earlier that we typically send out assessments about 3 times during the life of a program. You can now access those assessments. So as soon as your start assessment goes out to your mentees and mentors, you'll see this card pop up where you can decide to export the mentor or mentee assessment information. And just like Annemieke said, it will have all of the information in there. So all of the raw responses, including any open-ended responses. So there's a column for every single question or every single prompt that shows up in that survey, and then a row for every person who completed it. So you'll be able to see everything that came in, and then insert that into any kind of student information system or anything else that you're using to kind of analyze student data.
Great. So I know many of you are starting to actually launch surveys or think about the launch of those surveys, and we ideally want as many students to respond as possible. So can you show us, how would I see who hasn't responded? Maybe I know we have some things coming up about making it more likely to be able to get students to complete the surveys. Tell us a little bit about those features.
Yeah. So again, sorry, this is my new favorite tab on the assessments tab here. We have some new charts and graphs to let you know a little bit more about not just what people are responding, but also who is responding and who is not responding. So this chart down here at the bottom is the assessment survey completion chart. Again, it has some ability for you to switch between mentees and mentors here. But what it's showing you is this maroon color here will indicate participants who have completed a given survey, whereas this grayish blue color is participants who have not completed a given survey. So again, we've got our 3 surveys. We have our start survey, our mid survey, and our end survey. So you can always click in here to see who has or has not completed a certain survey. So for example, if my mid survey had gone out, I could click on this bar here, and this will show me all of the mentees who have not yet completed the mid program survey. So again, like you had mentioned before, this is definitely filterable, so you can get all of these emails very quickly and send some kind of mass communication out, nudging your students, letting them know why it's so important and why it's beneficial for them to complete the survey. And all you have to do is encourage them to go log into their participant dashboard. They'll see a prompt in there to complete the survey, and they can do that. And I think actually, Annemieke, you might have an image to show folks of what that will look like to the participants.
Yes, let me take over and share my screen again. Here is that view, again, for the participant experience, so that the students, the mentors, the mentees are able to get a sense of where the survey falls and the multiple things that they're doing to move through their mentorship experience.
Yep, exactly. So I would say, again, I would highly encourage you to, if you would like to see an increased response rate, what we have found is that when our participants are hearing directly from people who work at their school, they're much more likely to respond to these surveys. So downloading that export of all the people who have not responded, sending just one mass email to encourage these people, let them know why the survey is so important, and just direct them to go right to their dashboard, they will see this task show up. So in this image, you can see start of year assessment. That's what it will look like to the participant. They will see that on their dashboard. This is the home page. It's the first page they see when they log in, and they'll be encouraged to complete that survey.
Great, thanks, Kelly. All right, so we're going to jump into FAQs. So those of you on the line, if you do have questions, feel free to add them to chat, but we know there's a few that we do commonly get asked. We have all these documented in a help article that you'll receive after the session, but I do want to give Kelly a chance to explain some of these elements. So the first one is, how are these scores actually calculated? Can you get a little bit into the numbers here?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say there's 2 important things that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about how the scores are calculated. Number 1 is that, again, these surveys are sent to participants multiple times throughout the program. So the score that you see on somebody's profile page when you're looking at them is always going to be the score for the most recent survey that they have completed. And the second thing to keep in mind is that these are factor-based averages that you're seeing. So for a given participant, when they complete a survey, let's say for this participant we're looking at here, perhaps this student took the survey on August 1st, and they had 3 prompts in that survey that were related to sense of belonging. There are 3 factors that we're considering when we're putting together that average sense of belonging score for them. For the first one, they responded 5. For the next 2, they responded 1. So we average that together. And now if you were to go look at this participant's profile page on August 1st, you would see that their average sense of belonging would be 2.33 out of 5. And then that person completes a survey in November, and their responses change, right? They're feeling differently in November than they were in August. And so as a result, their average score changes as well, because now we're taking the average of their most recent responses, which were 5, 3, and 3. So we're seeing an average of 3.67.
Great. And then can you kind of explain that again when we talk about the overall score for the program?
Yeah, of course. So this is similar in that we're still always considering the most recent response. But things can maybe get a little bit more confusing at this stage because you have so many people you're working with, right? So we'll break this down to simplify it to imagine that you have a program that has 3 students in it. So let's imagine that's first student completes their assessment survey in August, and the second survey completes their assessment survey in August. The third student also completes one in August. We take all of those 3 responses from those students, and we will average them together to get a factor-based average of 2.33. So your program's average sense of belonging score, if you check it in August, would look like 2.33. However, again, people can take these surveys again, right? So let's say that your third student in December completed the survey once more, and they had different responses. So when we show you your average sense of belonging for your program in December, we'd be including the responses from your most recent survey response from that third person. So their August 8th responses wouldn't be included in that average.
I think that's an important clarification, is that the latest response kind of trumps or overrides previous responses. It's not an average of every response over time. It's an average of the most recent response from any student that's in that cohort or program. We get that asked a lot, which is why Kelley gave us very helpful visual.
Yeah, I'm glad to help.
A couple other questions before we jump to the chat. What's a good sense of belonging score? What's a bad sense of belonging score? How do you respond to this question?
Yeah, this is also a pretty common question that we get, hence frequently asked questions, I suppose. But I'll say for this one, generally speaking, we wouldn't call an average sense of belonging or academic self-efficacy score good or bad in and of itself. Those of you who work at your institutions, you're going to know your students the best. So you're likely the best person to determine where you hope to see your sense of belonging or academic self-efficacy scores go. However, after speaking with partners at various institutions, because we always like to do research with our partners, we heard from many of them that if a mentee has an average sense of belonging or academic self-efficacy score of under 3, out of remember that the scale is a possible 5, they would like to be notified so they can review the participants' details, potentially put a plan together, offer the participants some extra supports. Again, like we talked about, that might look like reaching out to their mentor, reaching out to somebody at the school, just generally putting together some next steps for how to support the students. So we tried to make that possible for you so you can quickly identify all the students who have an academic self-efficacy or sense of belonging score of under 3, just like we showed in the demo earlier.
Yeah. And I want to just add, like, average is not, things above average are not good and below average bad. These are also not data points that have inherent value to good or bad values to them. Any student experience data point is a helpful data point. And so the goal here is to give you the most up-to-date, authentic insights into the student's experience that you can act on. The next, I think, and final question, maybe we have one more after this. What kind of response rate should I expect running these assessments?
Yeah, so this kind of comes back to what you just said, which is any student response rate or any student response is a good student response, right? Any information we have from these students is helpful. I will say that we often assume that a large percentage of your audience needs to respond to the surveys in order for you to have really quality data. But while it's really important to make sure you're striving for that really accessible and faithfully completed survey, response rates might not always need to be quite as high as we think in order for you to make sure that you're able to gather learning. So a few things I would say to keep in mind. One, if it feels like it's hard for you to get survey responses, harder than ever before, perhaps you're not alone. In fact, in 2013, the National Research Council said that researchers across a number of different social sciences across the US and abroad have witnessed steady erosion in survey response rates. And higher ed is not immune to this. So just know that it's not just you. You're not doing anything wrong. It's other people are out there feeling the struggle as well. But also, we noted that in 2019, the institutional response rates for NESI surveys actually ranged from about 5% to 81%, but the average was 28%. And they found that as few as 25 to 75 respondents, depending on the size of your institution, appeared to provide really reliable institution level estimates for most institutions. So all this to say, while we really understand and encourage a strong push for as many responses as possible and have tried to make it easy for you to do that in the product, we also just want to recognize that exactly what Annemieke said is true. The responses you do get are perhaps a little bit more helpful than you think. So don't forget that. But also, another important thing to keep in mind, sorry, I'm going to continue to rant on this one for a second. If you're looking over your responses, I think some important questions to ask yourself, rather than, is my response rate high enough? Maybe consider asking, is there a noticeable demographic that's poorly represented in these responses? Have you heard from the populations that you're most looking to serve? And most importantly, perhaps, for the voices that aren't represented, do you feel like they are inclined to believe that their feedback will actually result in change? Because if they're not feeling that way, it's very unlikely that they're actually going to respond to your surveys. So keep all of that in mind. But yeah, if you ever have any questions about how we can increase response rates, or if you're concerned at all, you can always talk to your program success manager and we can share some strategies with you.
For sure. Absolutely. We can help. And then last thing I wanted to also share is you demoed a newer feature, but not our highlight for today, but the ability to add custom fields into profiles and the program intelligence charts. And so can you walk through how our partners can actually take advantage of that? Like if I want to add custom fields, what do I do?
Yeah. So this is a new feature. We've talked about it a little bit in the past, but in case you haven't heard, it's called the institution provided data feature. And what it allows you to do is, just like Annemieke mentioned, honestly, upload any data point that's important for you when you're thinking about how to segment out the data. So the way that you can do this is you'll want to chat with your mentor collective representative because they'll need the following information from you. They'll need a CSV of your program participants and any additional information that you'd like to see about them. So for example, on the slide here, you see that common fields that we see some of our partners upload are college, department, degree program. Sometimes they're assigned, the student's assigned as advisor. Once all of this information is uploaded into our system, you'll then be able to see it show up in your filters, see it show up in your exports, in that big chart on the homepage, that program intelligence chart. You can see it show up in that population dropdown. So you can start breaking out all the data points we're providing for you by all of these different segments that you care about, like breaking it out by the different colleges or the different departments or whatnot. So yes, so you'll share this information with us via a CSV that can be sent via Google Drive, something nice and zipped with a password if you'd like. And we just need each participant's email address and then any of the data that you want to provide along with that. And then you'll need to let your mentor collective representative know, where do you want this data to appear? You have the choice to turn it on for your filters, for the program intelligence charts, and or for your exports. So I highly encourage people to take advantage of this feature. You can do it up to 3 times a year, a new data upload, and it takes about 10 days turnaround. Once you talk to your, once you send the CSV over, it should take about 10 days for it to show up in your partner dashboard.
Thanks, Kelly. I have a couple questions that have come in on this. Are there limits to how many fields one can add, or the length of the data in the fields? Are there any limitations to be aware of?
As of right now, there are not. So I say go for it. Yeah, I like I mentioned, we have limited to just 3 uploads per program. So if you have a program running from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year, you can upload data 3 times. But as far as how much data is in those CSVs, there's not a limit.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to recap with next steps, or actually we'll pause for any other questions. Alex, did anything else come in chat wise here besides what I can see?
No, you're good to go.
Okay. So I want to share some suggested next steps. So how can you incorporate this into the launch of your program or the work that you're planning with us right now? The first is to have the right conversations with your program success manager or your partner onboarding manager to make sure you're being intentional about which assessments you are sending and when, that you are collecting the data you need when you need it, since especially those mid and late program assessments really give you the opportunity to get that refreshed insight into the student's experience that you can act on. The next thing is to think about that institution provided data. This is not an arduous task, but it can take some time for you internally to think about which data you want, which source system has it, perhaps to get internal permissions to have access to those data, or to submit a ticket to get it refreshed the next 2 times a year. So we do encourage you to have those conversations early, as opposed to waiting too late for you to be able to use it. again, get the ball rolling on those things sooner rather than later. Although we do often see folks wait until something like a census date to do the import, it's a good idea to kind of make sure you have all your ducks in a row before that moment. The next thing is make a plan to use these data in a formative manner. You are not used to having access to this information live all of the time. So how are you going to change maybe the way that you engage with the Mentor Collective product to act on these insights right away, to analyze your initial or your startup program survey data right away, as opposed to waiting for something like a presentation date from us or the end of the year to use these data? How are you using the data potentially from this past year if you're wrapping up a program right now? So make a plan to use those insights in a formative manner, not just in a summative manner. And then that might inspire you to add more users to the partner dashboard. You might realize that the Dean of Students needs to be in the system so that they can access the student profiles and help you respond to flags, or a certain set of coaches, or maybe you have an assessment professional that you have access to who is going to download these data and do some analysis. So think about who you might want to add as a user, hook up with your program success manager to get them oriented and ready to go. Again, downloading and analyzing that historical data, it's all at your fingertips now. Perhaps there's a data warehouse you want to pull it into. Perhaps there's an integration that you want to set up with another system. And in general, who else might benefit from these data? I know many folks who are doing great student success analytics work that would love to have non-cognitive data as part of those comprehensive understandings, or potentially even some of the insights that you get from students. So please keep in mind that these data are powerful, and they can also potentially even help you with the success of your program, with getting folks on board and using the experience of these students to drive success for many students at your institution. I do have one more chat that has come in question-wise, so I'm going to answer that while we pause for any other questions, and then we can wrap up. Do we need to filter the data, such as a scholarship group, to only upload those who are already Mentor Collective users, or can we just send the entire group of students? That's a great question. Kelly, do you feel comfortable taking that one?
Yeah, that is a good question. You can send over that full list. I will say it will be cleaner and a simpler process for your Mentor Collective representative if it is filtered down first. But there would be ways for the Mentor Collective representative to do that work for you. So yeah, you can definitely send over that full list.
Great. Yes, I want to say the same thing. As long as that identifier is in there that we can match it on, I think it'd be okay to have extra data, just not missing data. And then one more question, is it possible to export the assessment surveys together so that I can see what students have said in the start, in the mid, sounds like a little bit of comparison data in a single spreadsheet? So could you walk us through the format of the exports, Kelly, or how I'd accomplish that?
Yeah, it is a good question. Right now, the exports are only available in that separate view. To Annemiek's point earlier, there are some slightly different questions or prompts that are included in the start, mid, and end assessment. So that's why they're separated out. You could combine those things together, obviously, by exporting all of the CSVs and then just pasting the information in to put them all into one export. But yeah, right now you'd have to download all three of them.
Right. I was going to add, there are identifiers in there so that you can match respondents from one assessment to the next.
Yep.
But yeah, since the questions do change a little bit over time, you will see them in distinct files.
Correct.
Great questions. Love to hear you all thinking about ways to use these data. Really appreciative of you all spending some time with us today. And so I'll wrap up with just remember, if you haven't already started talking to your program success manager about your assessment plans, about the ways you want to use these data, about how it might inform your strategy for responding to flags as students start to become engaged in their mentor-mentee conversations, definitely encourage you to make sure this is on your call agenda and that you are ready to go with some of your, if you help us understand your needs, we'll definitely make sure that they're incorporated as part of our work with you throughout the year.